The hall fell silent. The evening lights glowed soft inside the grand hall. Chandeliers shimmered above the crowd, and the quiet hum of voices carried across the room. It was an event filled with laughter, formal smiles, and people dressed in their finest clothes. But in the middle of it all, Sandra Bullock sat with her hands folded tightly in her lap, her chest heavy with something she could no longer keep inside. Keanu Reeves was there too, standing near the side of the stage. He was calm, almost unnoticed, until his eyes caught Sandra's. He saw something in her expression that others had missed. Behind her smile was a shadow, something unspoken. The host announced Sandra's name, inviting her to speak. She rose slowly, the applause warm but distant in her ears. She walked to the stage, each step echoing like a heartbeat, and when she reached the microphone, she paused. For a moment, she only looked at the crowd. Then her voice broke through, soft but trembling. "I want to be honest tonight," she said. The room grew still. People leaned forward, sensing something different. "I have carried fear for years," she admitted. "Fear of failing. Fear of not being enough. Fear that even when the world applauds, I will still feel alone when I go home. Tonight I cannot pretend anymore. I am afraid." The silence was sharp, like the hall itself was holding its breath. No one moved. No one clapped. They only listened. Sandra's voice wavered, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I know people see strength in me, but they do not see the nights when I feel empty. They do not see the moments when I wish someone would just tell me it is okay to be afraid." Her confession spread through the hall like a quiet wave. Some lowered their eyes, others held their breath, but all felt the weight of her words. And then, before anyone else could respond, Keanu stepped forward. He did not rush. His steps were slow, steady, and his presence seemed to calm the air. He walked to the stage and stood beside her, not taking the microphone but letting his voice carry on its own. "Fear is not shame," he said gently. "Fear is proof that you are human. It is proof that your heart is alive and that you care deeply about the things that matter. To feel fear does not make you weak. It means you are brave enough to face the unknown." His words filled the silence like light breaking through clouds. The hall, once frozen, seemed to lean toward him. He turned slightly, looking at Sandra with quiet respect. "You have carried your fear with grace. You thought it made you small, but it has made you stronger. Because even with fear, you still stand here. You still give. You still shine." Sandra's tears finally fell, but her smile was fragile and real. The crowd saw it too, and something in them shifted. They were not looking at stars anymore. They were looking at people. Two people standing in truth. Keanu continued, his tone soft but steady. "We do not have to hide our fear. What we hide grows heavier. What we share grows lighter. Your words tonight did not make this hall weaker. They made it honest. And honesty is the beginning of strength." The hall stayed quiet, but it was no longer empty silence. It was full of emotion, full of reflection, full of respect. Sandra whispered, "Thank you." He shook his head lightly. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You chose to speak. You chose to be real. That is what moved this room, not my answer." But everyone in the hall knew it was both, the courage of her confession and the strength of his gentle reply. Then, slowly, one person began to clap, then another. Soon the hall filled with applause, not loud or rushed, but deep, like waves rising steady against the shore. It was not applause for a performance, but for truth. Yeah. Sandra looked out at the sea of faces, her fear still there but no longer crushing. She felt lighter, as if Keanu's words had given her permission to breathe again. And in that moment she realized something powerful. Fear could break her voice, but kindness could lift it again. And together, those two truths created something stronger than silence. After the applause rolled through the hall like a calm wave, then softened into a hush. Sandra stood still, breathing slowly, her hands no longer clenched. Keanu stayed at her side, not as a shield, but as a steady presence. The lights above seemed warmer now, like the room itself was learning how to breathe with them. From the front row, a woman rose and spoke gently. "Thank you," she said, voice trembling a little. "I did not know I needed to hear this tonight." Her honesty broke a wall in the room. A few others nodded, a few wiped their eyes. The atmosphere changed from performance to shared space, from distance to closeness. But just as Sandra began to feel safe, a voice from the back cut through, quick and sharp. "So what?" the man called. "You are afraid like everyone else. Why should we care? Why should this matter?" The hall tensed. The question hung in the air like a cold hand on a warm shoulder. Sandra felt her chest tighten. For a second, old fear tried to return, the kind that tells you to step back and hide. She glanced at Keanu. His face was calm, kind, unshaken. He took one small step forward and spoke in a quiet tone that carried to the very back. "We care, because when someone speaks honestly, they make a door for everyone in the room. Fear locks us inside ourselves. Honesty opens a way out." He turned toward the man, not with anger, but with respect. "You do not have to walk through that door tonight, but it is here, for you too." The room exhaled. Even the critical voice faded into silence. The host moved closer to the stage, unsure whether to continue the program. Sandra lifted a hand and smiled. "It is okay," she said. "We can continue." She looked at across the rows and added, "But first, thank you, all of you, for listening." She stepped back, ready to leave the microphone, when a stagehand hurried from the curtains, a little out of breath. He carried a small envelope, cream-colored, simple, with no name. He whispered to the host, then offered it to Sandra with shaky hands. "Someone said to give this to you when you finish speaking," he said. "They left it on the wings." A murmur moved through the hall, soft and uneasy. Sandra's fingers hovered. She glanced at Keanu again. His eyes asked a quiet question. "Do you feel safe?" She swallowed and nodded. She opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a short note, written in small, steady letters. "You said fear out loud. That was brave, but you did not tell them the whole truth. You did not tell them what started the fear." Under the words, there was a pressed leaf, thin and fragile, taped to the page like a memory. Sandra's breath slowed. The hall blurred for a moment, as if time leaned forward to hear her reaction. Keanu spoke softly so only she could hear. "You do not owe any secret to a note on paper," he said. "Your truth is yours. You choose what to share." She nodded, but the words in the note touched something old, something she had hidden even from herself. For a heartbeat, she nearly closed the envelope and walked away. Then she made a different choice. She stepped to the microphone again, her voice steady but soft. "Someone asked me tonight what started my fear," she said. "I think it began the year I learned to smile through pain so others would not worry. I thought kindness meant I had to carry it all alone. I was wrong. Real kindness is shared. Real kindness lets other people carry a corner of the weight." The hall listened so closely that even the lights seemed to hum more quietly. Then came a small surprise. A young usher in the aisle lifted a hand. "I am sorry," she said shyly. "I found this near the back row." She held up a bracelet with a broken clasp, simple and silver. "It might belong to you." Sandra looked at it and felt another tug in her chest. It was the same kind she used to wear years ago, when long days felt endless and nights were too quiet. She took the bracelet, held it in her palm, and smiled. "Thank you," she said. "It does not belong to me, but it belongs to a memory I needed to see." The crowd softened, the tension turning into something gentle. The man in the back who had questioned earlier stood again, but this time his voice had changed. "I am sorry," he said. "I spoke without thinking. I was afraid, and I hid behind sarcasm. Thank you for not shaming me." Keanu nodded toward him, humility clear in his face. "Thank you for coming back to the room," he said. "That is courage too." A faint flicker touched the lights overhead. The chandeliers blinked, then steadied. A sound from the balcony drew eyes upward. A quiet figure stood there, leaning on the rail, cap pulled low. The figure stepped back into shadow. For a second, Sandra felt the old chill again, the sense that someone was watching more closely than a fan or a critic. The host cleared his throat, trying to return to the program, but Sandra lifted a hand. "Before we go on," she said, "I want to ask something simple." She turned toward Keanu, her voice warm. "When you answered me, the hall fell silent. Why did your words sound so calm?" Keanu smiled slightly, not proud, just honest. Because calm does not mean pretending. It means choosing a soft voice when a loud one is easier. It means giving respect even when fear tries to take it away. His reply settled over the room like a blanket. People nodded, some placed hands on their hearts. The moment felt complete, almost healed. Then the stagehand hurried back, pale. He whispered to the host, who looked startled, and handed Sandra a second envelope. This one was blue, thin, and cold to the touch. Inside was a photo taken from the bail. Keanu's gaze followed hers. He saw the man in the last row sitting too straight, too still. Keanu's calm never cracked, but his voice carried more strength now. "Then let's not play his game. If he wants silence, we answer with truth. If he wants fear, we answer with courage." The next speaker on the program, a young actor, stood nervously at the podium. His voice wavered, caught between duty and the heavy silence in the hall. I don't think I can follow that," he said, glancing toward Sandra. "But maybe I can share something small. I used to hide my stutter. I thought it made me less. But tonight, hearing you, Miss Bullock, I realize it only made me more human." The hall softened again, hearts opening. The audience leaned forward, touched by his honesty. Sandra smiled through her unease. Her confession had started a chain, a ripple of courage. But when she looked back to the rear row, the man in dark clothes was gone. Only the empty seat remained. Her pulse quickened. She whispered, "He left. Why would he leave?" Keanu answered quietly, "Sometimes fear doesn't need to stay. It only wants to know if you noticed. But listen, his leaving doesn't take away what you gave tonight." His words steadied her again, but then, from the stagehand's hand, another envelope appeared. He seemed almost apologetic as he carried it forward. "This was just found near the stage curtains," he said softly. Sandra's breath caught as she accepted it. This one was pale gray, sealed with wax. She broke it open with careful hands. Inside was not a photo this time, but a folded sheet of paper with a single sentence written in clean letters. "Truth is not finished. What you hide is what we wait for." The words struck her deeply. She felt the hall's air grow heavier again. She looked at Keanu, panic flickering in her eyes. "What do they mean? What else do they want from me?" Keanu's reply, he was steady, almost like a promise. "They can only take what you let them. Truth is not theirs to demand. It is yours to give when you choose." Her breath slowed. His calm was like a hand on her back, guiding her to stand straighter. "Then maybe," she whispered, "maybe I have to tell them more." Keanu's eyes softened. "Only if you want to. Not because of pressure. Because it frees you." Sandra looked down at the broken bracelet, the fragile leaf from the first note, the strange pieces of a puzzle she had not chosen. She lifted her head, the microphone waiting in front of her again, and with a trembling but determined breath, she said, "You ask what I hide? Here it is. I hide that sometimes I feel like my kindness is only a mask. I hide that I laugh when inside I want to cry. I hide that I carry others' pain, but I do not know who to give mine to. I hide that I am tired of pretending I am always strong." Her words filled the hall, not heavy but raw. Some people wiped their eyes. Others looked at her with respect, deeper than applause. Keanu placed a hand over his heart, quiet, humble, steady. And somewhere in the back, though no one could see him, the watcher smiled faintly in the shadows. The watcher steps forward. The hall was heavy with silence after Sandra's words. The chandeliers above glimmered, but even their light seemed dim against the weight of her confession. She stood tall at the podium, her voice still trembling from honesty, yet the crowd felt more connected to her than ever before. Keanu stayed near, his calm presence anchoring the moment. He had not spoken yet, but the respect in his eyes told her everything. She was not standing alone. Then, from the back of the hall, a chair scraped against the floor. Every head turned. The figure who had slipped in earlier, the one dressed in dark clothes, was now on his feet. The sound of his movement was enough to still the hall again. The man began to walk down the aisle, slowly, each step echoing too loud in the quiet. His shoulders were straight, his face shadowed by the low brim of his cap. People shifted uneasily, unsure if he was part of the event or an intruder. Sandra's pulse hammered. Her hands gripped the podium tighter. Keanu's eyes sharpened, his body straightening, calm but ready. The man stopped halfway down the aisle and spoke, his voice low but carrying across the hall. "You talk about fear," he said. "But do you even know what fear really is? You confess and they clap. That is not fear. Real fear is when you speak and no one listens. Real fear is when the truth costs more than silence." A murmur spread through the hall. Sandra's breath caught, his words cut deep, not because they were true, but because they echoed her old doubts. Keanu stepped forward now, his tone steady but firm. "Real fear is when you let bitterness speak louder than kindness. What she did tonight was not weakness, it was strength. The cost of silence is far heavier than the cost of truth." The man's eyes fixed on Keanu. For a moment his lips curled in a faint, cold smile. "And what truth do you hide, Reeves?" The hall seemed to inhale sharply. Sandra looked at Keanu, fear in her eyes. She knew the stranger was pressing him, pushing him into the same corner where she had stood. Keanu didn't move quickly. He didn't need to. He let the silence stretch, then answered with humility in his voice. "I hide that I hurt. I hide that sometimes I don't feel enough either. I hide that I carry grief like a stone, and I don't always know how to set it down. But I do not let that make me cruel. I do not use it to shame others for being human." His answer spread through the hall like a quiet wave. People leaned in, their faces softening. The man in dark clothes tilted his head, his smile fading. Sandra felt her chest loosen. Keanu's honesty had not only defended her, it had broken the tension in the room. But the man was not finished. He took another step forward and pulled something from his coat. The crowd gasped softly. It was not a weapon. It was a photograph. He held it up high. "You want honesty? Here it is. This is the truth no one here knows." Sandra's stomach nodded. The photo showed her sitting alone on a park bench, her hands covering her face, shoulders bent under invisible weight. It was private, a moment no one was meant to see. The crowd shifted, uneasy. Sandra's cheeks burned. "How did you get this?" she whispered. The man's voice was cold. "Fear is not when you choose what to share. Fear is when the world takes what you wanted to hide. Tonight, they should see not only your stage, but your shadow." The hall buzzed with shock. People looked at Sandra, then at Keanu, waiting. Keanu stepped forward, calm but firm. "You're wrong," he said. "Shadows don't destroy truth, they prove it. What you showed doesn't shame her. It shows she's human. And that is why she has more courage than you." The man stared at him, silent. Then, almost as if the challenge had been an insert, he dropped the photo onto the aisle floor and turned. Without another word, he walked back up the row and disappeared into the shadows of the hall. The crowd exhaled, the tension slowly releasing. Sandra bent her head, her voice breaking. "I never wanted anyone to see me like that." Keanu leaned close, his voice soft enough for only her. "And yet they saw you tonight, stronger than you think. Not because you hid your shadow, but because you faced it." The crowd, once silent, rose to their feet. Applause filled the hall again, not the polite kind, but heavy, respectful, alive. But even as Sandra felt the warmth of their support, she knew the night was not finished. Somewhere out there, the watchers still moved in silence, waiting for another moment. The challenge in the silence, the applause in the hall swelled, but Sandra could not hear it fully. Her heart still beat too fast, her mind replaying the sight of the photo, the way her private pain had been exposed. The crowd's clapping was warm, but inside her chest she felt the old weight return. Keanu stayed close, his calm presence steadying her. He leaned in slightly, his voice quiet but strong. They tried to turn your pain into shame. Instead, you turned it into strength. Remember that. The applause isn't for perfection. It's for truth. His words steadied her breath, but before she could respond, a sudden noise echoed from the balcony again. A microphone screeched, feedback sharp against the chandeliers. The room stilled, every eye lifting upward. A voice came over the speakers. Low, deliberate, echoing through the hall. It was the watcher. "You think this is courage?" he said. "No. This is performance. You speak because the crowd applauds. You confess because it wins you respect. But what happens when the room turns against you? Will you still stand then?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Sandra froze, her throat dry. Keanu's jaw tightened, but his eyes stayed calm. The voice continued. "If you want to prove your honesty, then answer now. Sandra Bullock, what is the fear you never told even him? The fear you hide not from strangers, but from the one standing beside you." The hall gasped softly. Eyes flicked between her and Keanu. The challenge was cruel, cutting deep into her most private corner. Her pulse pounded. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. But then she looked at Keanu. His eyes held no pressure, no demand, only respect. He gave a small nod as if to say, "Only if you want to." She gripped the podium, her knuckles white. Her voice trembled, but she spoke. "My fear, the one I never said, is that I will be left behind, that one day the people I trust will walk away, and I will realize I was never as important to them as they were to me." Her words cracked, raw and sharp, but they filled the hall. No one clapped, no one moved. The silence was heavier than before, but it was full of empathy. Keanu stepped forward, his voice low but carrying. "Then let me answer that. You are not left behind, not tonight, not ever. Fear tells us lies. Truth tells us we matter. You matter, Sandra." His words dropped into the silence like stones into still water, rippling through every heart in the hall. The watcher's voice returned, sharper now, almost angry. "Easy words, but words are air. Prove it. If you care, then share your own deepest fear, Reeves. Or admit this is just a show." The challenge cut the air. The audience shifted, waiting. Some leaned forward, others held their breath. Keanu did not flinch. He took the microphone gently, his eyes still calm. "You want the truth?" he asked. "Then here it is. My deepest fear is not loss, not even death. It is the thought of kindness wasted, that I could walk through this world and not leave it gentler than I found it, that I could stand beside someone in their darkest night and fail to bring even a spark of light." His voice did not tremble. It rang soft but strong, echoing into the high ceiling. The hall was utterly silent, but it was not empty. It was full of respect, humility, and something greater. The watcher's voice hissed through the microphone. "So you think light is enough?" Keanu lifted his head, his calm unshaken. "No, I know it is." For the first time, the voice did not respond. The speakers clicked, cutting off. The balcony above was empty again. The audience, still stunned, broke into applause, louder than before, but this time, it was not only for Sandra. It was for both of them, for the raw honesty, for the courage to speak what was never meant for crowds. Sandra's tears slipped quietly down her cheeks, but she did not hide them. She turned to Keanu, her voice soft. "Thank you. I never thought I could say that out loud. Not here, not anywhere." He smiled slightly, humble as always. "You gave the room a gift. Honesty. No one can take that from you." But Sandra noticed something he didn't see. Far at the back, a man in a dark coat slipping out the doors. The watcher was not finished. She whispered, almost to herself, "Then why do I feel like the hardest part is still waiting?" The final truth. The hall buzzed with applause, but Sandra's eyes stayed on the back doors. The man in the dark coat had slipped out, and though the room felt alive with respect, her heart knew the story was not finished. The watcher had not been defeated, only quieted. Keanu stepped beside her, his presence steady, his voice low. "You don't have to chase shadows," he said. "What matters is what you gave tonight. Your truth is stronger than his silence." She nodded, but deep inside she feared the watcher would return. The applause began to soften, the crowd settling again. The host moved forward, unsure whether to continue or close the evening. Then, suddenly, the stage lights flickered. A hush swept the hall. The sound of footsteps echoed from the side entrance. Slow, deliberate. Every head turned. The man in the dark coat stepped back into the room, not hiding this time. His face was sharp, his eyes cold. He walked down the aisle until he stood only a few feet from the stage. The hall grew tense. Sandra's breath caught. "It's him," she whispered. The man's voice was calm, too calm. "You spoke of fear. You spoke of truth. But words are fragile. Tonight you won their respect, but tomorrow they will forget." Applause fades. Silence always returns. The crowd held its breath. Sandra felt her fear rise again, but Keanu stepped forward, his voice steady. "Maybe applause fades, but the memory of kindness does not. One truth can live in a person's heart forever. That is more powerful than silence." The man tilted his head. "And you think this room will remember?" Keanu nodded. "Yes, because they felt it. Truth isn't a show. It is an echo. Once heard, it stays." For the first time, the man faltered. His eyes swept the crowd, and what he saw was not weakness. It was a hall of faces watching him with calm defiance. People who had been moved by honesty, not shaken by fear. Sandra found her voice. She stepped to the microphone, her tone soft but clear. "You say silence always returns. Maybe it does. But tonight, silence met its match. Tonight, we broke it together." The hall stirred with energy, the crowd lifting their heads, nodding, whispering agreement. The man's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but something in the room stopped him. It wasn't force, it wasn't anger, it was unity. He looked at Sandra one last time, then at Keanu, and with a faint, bitter smile, he turned and walked out. This time, he did not return. The doors closed behind him, and the hall erupted, not with polite applause, but with deep, thunderous clapping, people rising to their feet. The sound filled every corner, louder than any fear. Sandra stood, her tears falling freely now, but they were not tears of weakness. They were release. Keanu hit her shoulder gently. "It's over." She looked at him, her voice breaking but strong. "Thank you, not just for tonight, but for reminding me that fear isn't the end." He shook his head, humble as always. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself. You faced it. You gave them honesty. You gave yourself freedom." She smiled through her tears. "But without your words, I don't think I could have stood." He met her eyes, his voice soft but certain. "Sometimes we only need one person to remind us we're not alone. Tonight, you reminded everyone." The crowd's applause carried on, but inside the hall something deeper had settled. Respect, resilience, kindness, truths spoken, shadows faced. Sandra lifted the broken bracelet in her hand, the one the usher had found earlier. She looked at it differently now, not as a symbol of weakness, but as a reminder that even broken things can still carry meaning. She held it high for the crowd to see. "This bracelet is cracked, but it is still beautiful. That is what we are. We are not perfect. We are not unbroken. But we are enough." The The hall roared with approval, and in that sound, Sandra finally felt the heavy stone inside her chest dissolve. Keanu smiled quietly, watching her stand tall, not as someone trapped by fear, but as someone freed by truth. And as the night ended, the hall did not feel silent anymore. It felt full of courage, full of kindness, full of voices that had learned the power of speaking.